Chapter 31. Why? Don't look at me with that face. I know that what I'm doing is foolish. Yu Jong-san waved his hand as if he was annoyed. Then why? Look here, Owner Kong. You aren't from Hwaum. Owner Kong's face went blank. What now? You arrived later and are the son-in-law of the man who owned the pavilion previously. You don't understand what Mount Hua means to those who were raised in Hwaum. No! Owner Kong yelled. What is this new shit? Why does it matter if he wasn't born in Hwaum? Look here, Owner Yu. Ah, enough. I already know what you will say. Yu Jong-san took a deep breath. I know that in a world where everything is money, even Hwaum is for sale. Owner Kong looked at the man with a puzzled face. He wondered what would be said next. But I am a person of Hwaum. And what does that have to do with this? Those who were born and raised here grew up listening to the legends and tales of Mount Hua. We were raised being told that we must enter Mount Hua and become great martial arts masters to have our names echoing across the world. It is still revered even for those of us who lack talent and can never enter. That's how great Mount Hua was, and we grew up listening to those legends and how they protected not just the world, but us as well. Owner Kong tilted his head, not understanding where this nonsense suddenly came from. It isn't just me. My father and my grandfather also grew up like that. Mount Hua is the pride of Shaanxi and of Hwaum, and... Yu Jong-san scratched his head and spoke. Not for me, but it was a source of pride for my father and grandfather. So what do you mean? But what does it make me if I am willing to destroy Mount Hua for the simple sake of money? When I enter the afterlife, will my father leave me in peace? I will be beaten for days and days like when I was a child. A low laugh broke out. Owner Kong turned his face. The laughter died down, and the others lowered their heads. So, for these sentiments, you are giving up a fortune. Giving up what? Didn't you hear the sect leader say he would give it back later? And you believe that. There is no reason not to believe. What are we going to do with that money anyway? Yu Jong-san spat on the floor. A person like you will take the money and move away. There will be plenty of ways to spend the money. If you go to places like Hangzhou, then you'll be able to play around without any worries. But I've spent my whole life in Hwaum. Where will I go with the money I earn? Should I spend it all on alcohol? That's not very fun for me. Yu Jong-san smiled. It wasn't a funny situation. He climbed the mountain enamored at the thought of receiving a large fortune. He was exhausted and wanted his money, but what was he saying now? Maybe I've gone mad. He would never do this in his right mind. Yu Jong-san knew that. But you will regret it. Of course I'll regret it, damn it. Do you think I'm saying this because I don't know I'll regret it? I know better than you. Of course I'll regret it. Yu Jong-san shouted. But it would be far more unpleasant to ruin Mount Hua with my own hands. Owner Kong looked at Yu Jong-san confused. The man was taking deep breaths as he got too excited. Look here, Owner Kong. I can make enough money to provide for myself. If I protect Mount Hua now, I may get my money back later. Then I can take it and live a decent life as always. But if Mount Hua is destroyed, I will have to live in regret each day, and every time I see my money, I will be reminded of what I've done. I don't want to live like that. Owner Kong clenched his teeth. Has he lost his mind? He couldn't understand what this man was talking about. But there is no need to understand. Why should he stop a man who was walking down a pit of fire with his own feet? Just one person changing his mind wouldn't change the situation. Do whatever you want to. It won't change anything if you do it alone. Who said he was alone? Owner Kong turned his head at it. Owner Saw Moonjong walked up and stood next to Yu Jong-san. What are you doing? Can't you see? Owner Kong frowned. But it wasn't just that one man. Perhaps the words of Yu Jong-san were the trigger. 5 of the 20 people stood next to him. Oh my God! Owner Kong shook his head. When have I ever seen such pathetic people? How could people who claim to be merchants make such stupid choices? No. Owner Kong controlled his expression. If it wasn't for Mount Hua, they would have never made such a choice. I suppose that's how truly absolute their influence is here. If you're swayed so easily by your emotions, you won't be able to make the right judgments. Disrespecting the opponent was something a merchant should never do. It was the right time to think about the potential of Mount Hua, which was being displayed right now. Owner Kong looked at the people who went to the other side. Everyone was showing signs of regret, yet they looked oddly refreshed. Stupid people. Are they proud of not abandoning their sect till the very end? This is only meaningful while Mount Hua exists. Even if the payment is postponed, Mount Hua won't be able to afford to pay the rest of the merchants. They've lost out on a fortune due to a moment's misjudgment. Owner Kong decided that and asked, "Is there anyone else who thinks otherwise?" The others looked at Hyunjung and then shook their heads. "Sect leader," Owner Kong smiled. "I didn't realize that the name of Mount Hua was still so great, but that is all. The rest of us have no intention of delaying the payment date, so return to us the money we lent you." Hyunjung smiled. His eyes weren't looking at Owner Kong, but the ones behind him. "Is there really no one else here willing to help us?" When there was no answer, Hyunjung nodded. "Then it is unavoidable. Sect leader, don't rush, Owner Kong." Chung Myung flinched. Hyunjung's voice was soft, but there was a force he couldn't resist. Hyunjung looked around at the merchants with Yu Jong-san, who smiled brightly. "Still, it is enough that there are a few people who would side with Mount Hua. Doesn't that mean that the world hasn't yet abandoned Mount Hua?" Owner Kong couldn't say anything, and Hyunjung loudly called, "Eunam." "Yes, sect leader." "Bring it." "Yes." Eunam bowed his head and walked off quickly. Seeing that, Owner Kong frowned. Does he really have it? It couldn't be. Just because Owner Kong had tricks up his sleeve, that didn't mean the sect leader could do the same and receive a strong backing. If there was, the information would have certainly entered his ears. Was it a bluff? No, that didn't make sense either. You can only bluff when something is in the background to fall back on. The current Mount Hua couldn't afford such a dangerous bluff. Eunam returned before Owner Kong could finish organizing his thoughts. He went alone, but now came back with 3 people. A box. The people seemed to be of the same age as Eunam, which meant they were elders. One of them was bringing a large box. "Sect leader, we brought it." Hyunjung pointed ahead. "Put it down." "Yes." Tuck. The box was placed on the floor. Owner Kong looked down at the chest, then back up and asked, "This?" "There is a fortune in that box. Check for yourself." "Fortune?" "Yes." Owner Kong looked at the box with suspicious eyes. "I don't think he is playing with me." The Hyunjung that he knew wasn't a sly man who would joke in this situation. So was there money in this box? Various thoughts came to his mind, but now wasn't the time to think. A box of money was right in front of him, so why bother thinking about it? Owner Kong approached the box as if possessed and slowly opened the lid. He narrowed his eyes and checked what was inside. This is riches? Were the riches these books? Sect leader, are you messing with us right now? Why would I do such a thing? I am sure I have what you wanted. What we wanted? You will know once you read it. Owner Kong calmed down his emotions and pulled out one of the books. He then began to read the contents in it. Flap, flap. The sound of pages being turned at a rapid pace. His face gradually crumpled and changed various shades of color as each page was turned. This. Owner Kong's face completely changed, so the merchants behind him slowly approached. What is that? Let us see it too. When he didn't answer, they glanced at the box. After confirming that several books were inside, they too reached out for them. What is this? Each one who checked the contents grew nervous and soon became suspicious. Aren't these ledgers? Yes. Hyunjung nodded his head. It looks like old ledgers. So why are you bringing it out now? Hyunjung smiled. The ledgers you are looking at now were created by Mount Hua for the management of our businesses. Huh? What? Hyunjung narrowed his eyes. Owner Kong, have you checked it? Hyunjung's voice resounded clearly. These ledgers contain information proving that the ownership of the Huam businesses which you are running belongs to Mount Hua. Huh? Ah, no. What do you mean, sect leader? Silence! Hyunjung firmly cut off their words, and he opened his mouth to those who hadn't come to their senses. Mount Hua has been so kind to you, but to think that you would repay our kindness like this. No matter how good Mount Hua is, we aren't the kind to show kindness to rats who bite their own masters. Hyunjung spoke out sharply. Therefore, based on these ledgers, Mount Hua will confiscate not only the businesses you have, but also the property that you have accumulated under the name of the businesses. A bolt of lightning cracked down through the dry sky, quickly crushing down their dreams. Chapter 32. No one was able to speak. It was because of the declaration which came out of Hyunjung's mouth. Those who understood what it meant couldn't speak, and those who had yet to grasp the situation couldn't open their mouths in such a heavy atmosphere. Sect leader, what are you saying? Sect leader! A commotion broke out. The merchants screamed until their faces turned red, but Hyunjung didn't change his expression. A cold expression they had never seen from him was looking down on the merchants. It is as I said. But, we don't understand what is happening. It was then. Silence. Owner Kong said in a cold voice, which froze the heated crowd where they stood. Hyunjung and Kong Mun-yeon locked eyes as electricity seemed to crackle between them. Tell me, Owner Kong. The attitude had not changed, but something more had. Hyunjung was no longer the weak pushover pretending to remain calm. Even Owner Kong felt stifled at the sect leader's change. This joke has gone too far. A joke, you say? Right. Their eyes stayed locked together, each trying to overwhelm the other. Hyunjung typically would have softened his gaze, but he didn't back down at this moment. I am sorry, but the sect leader of the great Mount Hua doesn't joke. Hearing that, Owner Kong spoke. Certainly. According to the ledgers, most of the businesses of the Hua merchants come under Mount Hua. And if it was true that the businesses were taken over, then you can surely confiscate them. You're well aware of the situation. But, Owner Kong smiled. But this was a different smile. It was as if he was trying to fake it. Isn't that only if the ledger is legitimate? Hyunjung kept staring without saying a word, and Owner Kong continued. How can you prove if these books which sprouted up out of nowhere are genuine? Hyunjung narrowed his eyes. Are you saying that Mount Hua faked these documents? Mount Hua would never do such a thing. Owner Kong took a step back. But couldn't Mount Hua be deceived by some charlatan? We can't trust them unless they are verified. Right. That is common sense. The other merchants yelled. Hyunjung, who watched them, nodded slowly and then looked at Hyunyoung. Finance head. Yes, sect leader. What do you think? There is truth to their words. Hyunyoung answered without a change in his expression, which delighted the merchants. What should we do? Sect leader, the focus of this discussion is wrong. Hyunyoung smiled. It isn't our business to determine if the ledgers are genuine or not. In such cases, isn't it the government which makes such determinations? Right. Hyunyoung continued to speak. That's why half of the books were already entrusted to the officials in Hwam to check their authenticity. If the books get verified, the officials will go and confiscate their businesses. Owner Kong's eyes widened at that. You already gave them? Right. Why? Is something wrong? Hyunyoung's casual words made Owner Kong feel like he'd fallen into a frozen lake. A cold sweat began to trickle down his back. Damn it. If he was in Hwam, he could have done something. But they were now on Mount Hua, and in their absence, the officials could rush in and take over their workplace. He had no way of dealing with them while away. That bastard. Owner Kong glared at Hyunjung. Hyunjung had planned this from the beginning and gathered them here. Showing the ledgers directly to the merchants simply delayed the time. Everything was going according to what he wanted. When did you leave the ledgers to the officials? Around 2 days ago. 2? Owner Kong gnashed his teeth. 2 days was more than enough to verify the ledgers. It was said that half of them were given to the officials, but they would certainly want to validate all of them. It was clear. The ledgers currently in the box must have already been validated. In other words, at the bottom of Mount Hua, officials were checking the authenticity of the ledgers and were preparing to confiscate the businesses. Mount Hua helped protect the world for generations. If the sect leader himself requests something by utilizing the sect's connections, isn't it obvious how fast things would happen down there? Perhaps there was already a commotion down there. "Sect leader!" Owner Kong yelled in an angry voice. However, Hyunjung was no longer the generous person he was a few days ago. "Keep your voice down." Hyunjung's whole body was giving out a strong force. Even Owner Kong, who was rarely surprised, ended up bowing to him. The name of Mount Hua, the energy now raging from this man, showed the worth of that name. "You have no right to speak." Hyunjung stared at the merchants with cold eyes. Some, unable to overcome the pressure, lowered their heads. "A true friend is one who reaches out when things are difficult. There is no need to show kindness to those who held a sword to our throat during trying times. Go back. By the time you return, everything will already be over." Hyunjung sighed. "It is impossible to ignore how you have treated us. Yet, I will give permission to each of you to take a single cartload of your wealth." Sect leader! They couldn't understand just how things got to this point. "I have shown you the greatest favor I could." At that moment, Hyunjung spoke. "Sect leader, these are the people who desecrated Mount Hua and siphoned off its wealth. Not just that, they tried to take over our very foundation despite all we've done for them. To show favor to such people, if we let go of an animal which was about to bite us, it will turn into a beast and devour us." Hyunjung waved his hand at that. "I've already made my decision, so we won't be talking about this." "Yes, sect leader." Hyunjung lowered his head. "Go down. Shouldn't you see with your own eyes how things are going?" Owner Kong's face distorted. Gritting his teeth, he glared at Hyunjung as if he wished to kill him. "Sect leader, you've been hiding such a poisonous heart behind an amiable facade." "Poisonous heart?" Hyunjung smiled. "Sure, call it a poisonous heart, but I feel that I pale in comparison to you. I will not forget this debt." "Right, Unam, guide them out." "Yes, sect leader." Owner Kong turned around, and without waiting for Unam, he started walking. The merchants, who didn't know what to do, looked at the sect leader and hurriedly began to follow Owner Kong. They had to go down and check what was happening. Hyunjung sighed as he looked at the people moving. "Sect leader, you worked hard." Hyunjung smiled at Hyunjung. "Now, Mount Hua is finally free. It is good. Don't relax too much. We've only crossed one mountain now. Will there be greater mountains than this? Now, everything is set." Hyunjung smiled brightly, seeing Hyunjung, who wasn't sure what to do, get lost in the excitement. It had been ages since he had last seen the head of finance so happy. Everyone in Mount Hua was carrying a heavy load on their shoulders. All thanks to that child. It could be said that this was a prosperous time for Mount Hua. A reward should be given, but what kind of reward should he give to the one who made this happen? He smiled. Hyunjung, who thought that, turned his head to Yu Jong-san and the others. And they immediately bowed to Hyunjung. Even in these difficult times, you kept our graces in your hearts. Hyunjung's attitude was different from when he dealt with the other merchants. It was soft. Sect leader, what will happen to us? It doesn't matter. It doesn't change that your businesses belong to Mount Hua, and things of Mount Hua should be returned to us. But I will ensure that you continue to handle the businesses and receive payment. Yu Jong-san's face calmed. This situation was better than those who were running down the mountain now, but they were losing their businesses all the same. Wouldn't Yu Jong-san now be an employee and not the owner? Then, the moment Yu Jong-san tried to protest, Hyunjung opened his mouth. Excessive greed precedes a downfall. It is also a sin to try and oppress others with a business that isn't yours. Mount Hua is just giving you a chance to lessen the weight of your sins. Sighs came out. All of this had resulted from greed. Grandfather, what have you done? He was flustered again. Finance head. Yes, sect leader. Isn't it true that they didn't betray the loyalty that they had to Mount Hua and helped us at the last minute? It is true. Let's discuss this together. There should be a good way. Shouldn't Mount Hua be a warm place for their close friends? Yes, sect leader. Hyunjung stepped forward and told the merchants, Come this way. Let us head in and discuss. Yes. The merchants followed him with complex emotions. As everyone moved, Hyunjung remained in a place alone. He watched Mount Hua each day, but Mount Hua now seemed different to his eyes. The barren and faded buildings seemed to be full of vitality. Does one perception of life all depend on how the heart is feeling? No, everything doesn't simply end like that. Mount Hua, which was touched by tragedy, had received its first blessings in several decades. The flow of life is such a strange thing. Once the direction of flow changes, it isn't easy to reverse it simply through your own efforts. Now that a path for a better future was opened, Mount Hua will be different from before, which Hyunjung believed. Perhaps today is the trigger that will bring back the forgotten glory of Mount Hua. It will. Hyunjung's face, full of wrinkles, had a deep smile. You! In the distance, a wrinkle-free face crumpled and disfigured itself. That fucking bastard! Chung Myung's eyes went wide with indignation. What? What do you mean by a cart? What was that calm-looking man doing? Come on, I will show you what a beast is. Hyunjung sent the merchants away, but Chung Myung would not let them go so easily. Chapter 33. Sahyung, great Sahyung. What is it? Did you hear? Yunjung smiled and asked. Hear what? The rumors circulating around. Haven't you heard them? I have ears, so there's nothing I cannot hear. When Yunjung answered, Jogul said, the merchants of Hwalm, whom Mount Hua was indebted to, turned out to be Mount Hua's representatives in the past. All their businesses belong to Mount Hua. I see. There's a riot in Hwalm. Officials are occupying and confiscating their property. I heard about that too. Oh my God, why are you so calm? This is why I shouldn't talk to people who want to become elders here. Jogul beats his chest as if he was frustrated. Is that such a big deal? It is. It's an amazing thing. Do you know how much money it will be if all the businesses are confiscated? Putting aside the wealth, just their businesses alone, we won't have to worry about making ends meet in Mount Hua for generations. So? Yunjung looked at Jogul with a slightly renewed sense of vigor. Yunjung was someone who was aiming to become a Taoist in Mount Hua. There seemed to be a difference between what he saw as essential and what Jogul considered a huge deal. This isn't to be bigger than I thought. Sahyung. Sahyung will one day have to lead Mount Hua, and it will be a disaster if you don't have the money to run it. I should keep this in mind. He heard the rumors, but he didn't think too deeply about them. He merely thought that being able to avoid paying the debt was a blessing, but it seemed like there were much more profound implications for others. So a new question arose. But how did this happen so suddenly? Why did the sect leader endure such humiliation until now? Jogul's face became strangely complex. They said they found some old ledgers. Ledgers? Right. Ledgers related to the businesses of Mount Hua. They found it a few days ago, so Jogul seemed to trail off as he quietly ended it there. Seeing that Yunjung couldn't understand, Jogul began again. Found a few days ago. Huh? The ledgers were found a few days ago, and the ledgers had to be some sort of books, right? Right. Yunjung smiled bitterly. It is fortunate that we happened to see some books get discovered just a few days ago, right? Yes. Jogul and Yunjung couldn't say anything more and exchanged subtle glances. That box! There must have been books inside it. It was too perfect to be a coincidence. Besides, wasn't the reaction of the sect leader who checked it too extreme? I really want to say it couldn't be, but I feel the same. Jogul and Yunjung's faces darkened a little. Besides, the reaction of that idiot before it happened was... Honestly, it was too strange. Ouch! What is this? Why is there a stone here? No! My God! This isn't a stone. Why did someone bury this here? That's so weird. Very weird. Should I dig? Is it fine if I dig it? What could be buried here? Such a strange thing. It couldn't be a treasure, can it? Yunjung closed his eyes tightly. If you want to deceive someone, at least act properly, damn it. He couldn't forget that awkward voice. Even a 3-year-old would do better than him. He is up to something. That was what anyone would have thought. Soon after that crappy performance, the box was uncovered. As expected, right? Jogul and Yoonjung turned serious. Where the hell did he find it? The more we want to know, the more we end up not knowing. Yeah. Yoonjung shook his head. There were too many strange details. Even if he didn't pay attention, everything seemed suspicious. Nevertheless, Yoonjung isn't very wary of Chung Myung because his sincerity towards Mount Hua is evident. This situation was no exception. Didn't Mount Hua benefit from Chung Myung finding those ledgers? Anyway, it was at that moment. Great Sahyung! A loud voice came from inside the room. What is going on? Have you seen Chung Myung? Why him? Sect leader is looking for him, but we can't seem to find him. He isn't even in his room. Yoonjung, who tried to remain calm, went stiff, and soon his expression turned dark. He's not there? Yes. We can't find him anywhere. No. Yoonjung jumped up and started to run towards Chung Myung's room. He burst through the door, slamming it open, quickly scanning the room. He even inspected the closet. Great Sahyung, what's wrong? Jogul, who was a step late, asked. It's missing. Yoonjung pointed to the open closet. Resting peacefully inside the closet was Chung Myung's uniform. What? Did he take off his uniform? Where? At that moment, Jogul's eyes widened. The uniform was taken off and placed in the closet. Then the clothes which were missing were... Don't tell me. The black clothes which Jogul brought to him previously were missing. Yoonjung's face contorted. Again. He's up to something again. The two of them couldn't tell if Chung Myung was a boon for Mount Hua or a bane. A group of men stood looking at their carts with a bewildered face. The carts contained a fraction of the wealth they had gathered. Each one was filled with wealth to help them survive. For someone with no money, it would be a startling amount. But for those here, looking at this wealth left them with an indescribable feeling as they recalled the memories of what led to their current state. In one day, like being struck by a bolt of lightning from a cloudless blue sky. As soon as they scurried down from Mount Hua, they saw their workplaces already occupied by government officials. They were armed and surrounded their businesses with official order to confiscate everything. They only heard shouts from the officials ordering their men to confiscate their things. What the hell is going on? Then were the ledgers real? It was shocking and seemed unfair. Who would have thought that the businesses being run for generations belonged to Mount Hua? Since it was operated by their fathers, they thought it was theirs. But in one day, it was taken away and they were kicked out of Hwaum. Where else in the world could there be such an unfair situation? Every merchant gathered wore the same dark expression. When they saw one another dragging their carts, their hearts began to break as they looked truly destitute. What the hell is this? This is beyond words. Sighs emerged from all around. They were exiled, but since Mount Hua informed the officials to let them take a cart full of belongings, they were given some time to gather everything. Even if they wanted food, they had to leave Hwaum and buy it elsewhere. Are we to leave like this? What more can we do? Protest! Protest? The owner of Plum Blossom Inn, Jin Yi-san, looked at Chung Myung in anger. Are you saying that even after watching what happened in front of our eyes? We are the thieves. Thieves! If the sect leader hadn't shown mercy to us, we wouldn't have even had the chance to leave. We would have been imprisoned. How do you intend to argue their proof? A few people sighed, and their shoulders drooped. Damn it! Jin Yi-san turned. I'm leaving. Already? Didn't you hear that we would be imprisoned if we didn't leave within an hour? We need to get out of here first. In the end, they all nodded helplessly. Those who watched him slowly followed. After traveling for some time, they were able to get out of Hwaum with their carts. They briefly pulled their carts into the shade beneath some trees to rest. For this to happen. The officials who are monitoring behind us have returned too. Maybe we can get a moment of peace now. Peace? What shall we do next? As they got past one issue, other problems began to come in sight. A few of the men looked at Chung Myung. Seeing that he hadn't said a single word, They were tempted to make the man speak and take responsibility for what happened. Owner Kong, a sharp voice. What should we do now? As soon as Chung Myung asked, the others began to join in. Say something. Didn't you say that we only needed to trust you? How did this happen? We believed in you, and now we have turned into scammers and thieves. How are you going to take responsibility for this? At that, Chung Myung slowly raised his head. Everyone who saw his eyes went silent. Chung Myung's eyes, which had always been soft, were no longer glistening. Are you blaming me? Hearing the cold voice, they were all suppressed by his momentum and backed away. No, we didn't mean it like that. We meant measures, some countermeasures. As everyone flinched, Chung Myung, who was overwhelming the crowd, further bolstered the momentum. You pathetic bastards. Chung Myung got up. It wasn't as if we were hoping to have a good relationship with Mount Hua. Is there any one of you who thought otherwise? Everyone must have realized this to some extent, didn't you? There was no answer. Those who still knew shame bowed their heads, but most didn't. Chung Myung said, No need to make a fuss. For now, just endure. However, this isn't going to end like this. Do you have something in mind? How can those ledgers be legitimate? They're obviously forged. What? You must know that. With Mount Hua's connections, manipulating the authenticity of the ledgers isn't very difficult. He must have decided to share the wealth with the province officials. Ah, the merchants nodded their heads. Then, let's go to Luoyang for now. We can take care of matters there. If they try to suppress us with such power, we will have to push back with greater power. I will surely punish the wicked Mount Hua and that sect leader. Oh, right. It doesn't make sense for them to suddenly have a bunch of books from 100 years ago. We need to uncover their crooked tricks. The voices of merchants grew louder. It didn't matter if the ledger was real or fake. As Chung Myung said, if they can utilize great enough power, even real books would become fake. Then getting their businesses back wouldn't be a huge deal. Seeing that, Chung Myung smiled. So, if you have nothing to worry about, I will take care of everything. So just trust and follow me. We believe in you. We believed in you from the start. Pathetic bastards. Chung Myung frowned. They were trash, but he still needed them. It was better to have people who would follow his words than to be alone. Once he reached Luoyang, the situation would be reversed. He had a strong backer, which could give him strength. What bullshit! Then, an unfamiliar voice flew in, and Chung Myung turned his head. Chapter 34. When? Chung Myung was visibly shocked. He didn't sense anyone approaching, but someone was standing right in front of him. Who is that? As he looked at the owner of the voice, Chung Myung's feelings changed from shock into bewilderment. A black cloth clung tightly to his body. Another black cloth obscured his face, and he held a sword in one hand. It was obviously a robber. But Chung Myung's gaze drifted upwards. The blazing sun caught his eyes as his vision clouded over. A crazy bastard! A robber was roaming on the streets in broad daylight. Did that make any sense? What did you say? Instead of Chung Myung, someone else asked. The masked man looked at the person and spoke. I said, What bullshit? Chung Myung looked at the robber with blank eyes. Is he going to die? Is it some old man? A bent waist with an emaciated body made the man look like a skeleton. Every move seemed to cause his bones to ache, and what can be seen of his hidden face were tired eyes that looked old and withered. Or was it a young child dying? No, that couldn't be. What business does he have? He doesn't seem like a passerby. The masked man coughed a few times and shook his head at the question. Shit, I'm going to die this way. Can't you see what's going on? What's going on? A man dressed like this appears before you in broad daylight? What do you think his identity is? Someone who's gone mad? Or dementia? Robber! A robber! Oh, you really were a robber. I couldn't believe it. Chung Myung stopped smiling. This man, claiming to be a robber, looked like he couldn't even catch a mouse. Of course, downplaying others based on their appearance wasn't a good idea. But now, this man's appearance wasn't the only problem. Although he had a sword in his hand, no one could feel any energy from him. And any rational man with no energy wouldn't be walking around in those kind of clothes. This was something only a crazy person would do. "Look here, old man." Chung Myung waved his hand. "It seems you've lost your way at the sight of wealth. It might seem like a jackpot, but don't waste your life here. Quickly return. Looking at the riches, the jackpot for sure. Oh, it must be you." "I don't understand what you mean." Since the masked man couldn't communicate clearly, he tapped on his waist a couple of times, raised the sword he was using as a cane, and pointed to Chung Myung. "I'm not trying to steal your money. I'm trying to recover my property. Didn't you say you were a robber a while ago? See? You understood it so clearly despite the coughing." "Huh?" Chung Myung frowned. Since he couldn't rob, this robber was trying to stick around like a beggar. "It wouldn't be better for you to leave before we are forced to take action. Do you want to try? Are you serious?" The moment Chung Myung was about to scream, the tip of the masked man's sword was aimed at him. "I thought you had a brighter head on your shoulders, but it seems you don't understand." Chung Myung stopped speaking. A moment of silence passed. Chung Myung, who was looking at the masked man, asked in a slightly different tone, "Are you from Mount Hua?" At his question, the other merchants seemed shocked. "Mount Hua? What do you mean, Onekong?" Chung Myung didn't answer the questions. Dealing with the annoying bastards wasn't important now. The masked man was his current priority. The masked man shook his head. "It seems you do understand. You do know that the talks with Mount Hua are done, right?" "The talks with Mount Hua are done, but the talks with me aren't done yet." "Did the sect leader send you? Does he seem like that kind of person?" "No." Chung Myung knew the personality of the sect leader. There was no denying that the man was dignified and had his own sense of justice. He wasn't the kind to send someone to clean up after letting them go. "Are you saying that you came from Mount Hua against the will of your own sect leader?" "It's fine." The masked man shook his head. "Because I'm not in a position to listen to each and every word of that child." Chung Myung's face darkened. Child? Although covered with a mask, he considered this man with a sloppy waist, weird body, and old-fashioned words to be quite old. Even in comparison to the sect leader of Mount Hua, this man seemed older. In other words, the person in front of them right now could be a former master of Mount Hua. But they aren't the kind to come out and act like this. He couldn't figure it out. It was his will to never disturb his composure in front of people. But the person in front of him could be a former master. Chung Myung's complexion darkened. "I didn't realize that former members of Mount Hua would be so petty." "Petty?" The masked man snorted. "Aren't you being petty by pointing a sword at us and hoping to take what little we have left? What would your senior think if he saw this now?" "Senior?" The blue eyes behind the mask narrowed. "Huh? Look at him. He understands seniority in the sect." Senior was something Chung Myung was called in his time, though he was quite the rogue at that time. If Chung Myung was a simple businessman, he wouldn't know that much about seniority within the sect. But he mentioned it. Chung Myung tilted his head. Something smells off. Something very musty. Maybe this wasn't just done by some money-crazed people. "Well, it's fine either way." Chung Myung swung his sword. "I don't know if the sect leader let you go so easily because he's naive, or if he simply hasn't learned anything. Personally, with my temper, I would rather just break your bones and be done with it. But for the sake of the sect leader, I will respect his decision to let you go. Leave the carts and get out of here. Then I won't catch you." "Ha ha ha ha." Chung Myung burst out laughing. "Old man, do you think I left because I lacked strength?" "Yes." Chung Myung was confused. It was weird how this old man talked. Every time he spoke, Chung Myung would be left speechless. "Well, you're mistaken. The reason I backed down was to avoid making it a larger problem. It's not as if I'm unable to catch a man wearing a mask calling himself a robber. Well spoken. Oh my, I'm dying. Seeing the masked man hunch over and coughing, Chung Myung felt a bit sorry for him. If the situation allowed, he even wanted to help him. Tears welled up in his eyes looking at those shaky limbs and bent waist. Old man, if you back down, we won't bother you. It seems like things are difficult for you too, so don't stand up and simply head back. The old man has already died. He was a kid now. Aigu, that pure internal ki is killing my body. His body wasn't mature, so he had no choice but to use it, but he never expected the wounds to be so severe. There was no way he could feel fine when he was supposed to be resting for 3 months, but he decided to go wandering the streets. He was thankful they misunderstood him to be an old man, but I have nothing to say. Chung Myung swung his sword. Those who want to take a beating, stay here. Those who value their lives can leave empty-handed. Back in the old days, I would have just pounced without asking a question. Recently, though, I'm learning to be patient, so don't test my temper. You speak well. Chung Myung drew a line like he didn't want to speak anymore. This is your last warning. I will not show you any more consideration. I get it. Tell the people hiding to come out. Chung Myung was startled. He noticed. Following behind him were a group of hidden escorts. They were so talented that it would be difficult for even a trained martial artist to feel their presence. Come out! As the words fell, dozens of warriors appeared from the grassy terrain. Huh? When did these people, the merchants, gathered close to their carts, their faces rife with fear? Of course, they couldn't have noticed the guards following them. Once more, Chung Myung still wanted to give the old man a chance to step down, but went silent at what happened. A sound that made his shoulders shake, and swash! The warrior who jumped out the farthest collapsed suddenly. Upon seeing that, Chung Myung's legs trembled. Chung Myung clicked his tongue and raised the sword. Anyway, pak, kids these days, talk a lot. Pak, I didn't act like this in my time. Thud. 5 escorts fell before Chung Myung could figure out what happened. He couldn't understand it. Chung Myung retrieved his sword, put it on his shoulder, and looked at Chung Myung. It may have looked cool if anyone else had done it, but now Chung Myung was weak and slumped over. Seeing him bent down, seemingly in pain, evoking a sense of misery in his movements, made the onlookers feel a sort of pity for him. Child, Chung Myung smiled and continued. You don't seem to know much, but none of the kids who ignored me in the old days returned with their limbs intact. You should listen well to the words of your elders. I wonder, will some old-fashioned medicine work on you? Chung Myung walked with his sword on his shoulder, whistling. The warriors who saw it faltered and stepped back at his approach, completely crushed by the momentum. Stand back, you useless trash! Chung Myung, who yelled at the warriors, grunted through his teeth. Was there still someone this strong hidden in Mount Hua? He thought Mount Hua was just an old tiger with its teeth and claws removed. No, that was correct. The mistake was overlooking the fact that a crippled tiger is still a tiger. Even without its teeth and claws, it could kill a man with its strength alone. I don't know why you waited until now to appear. If you had come out earlier than now, Mount Hua wouldn't have turned this way. Just as Chung Myung was opening his mouth, Chung Myung continued. But you've come at the wrong time. I wanted to deliver a blow to Mount Hua, but this works as well. If someone like you dies at my hands, the sect leader will surely grieve for quite some time. Prepare yourself. Chung Myung raised his energy. The grass around was ripped up and soared around in a frenzy. It was energy far greater than what a store owner could be capable of. Right, I knew something was up with you. Chung Myung's eyes shone. Don't worry. At the very least, I won't cut that mouth of yours. Chung Myung walked towards Chung Myung, while Chung Myung ran towards Chung Myung. Chapter 35. There was no disrespect for the opponent. Although Chung Myung was a half-baked warrior, his attitude wasn't inferior to that of a truly strong martial artist. Those who walk the path of martial arts should never underestimate their foes. Even a tiger does its best to catch a rabbit. Moreover, there was no way he could be more alert after seeing how Chung Myung dealt with the escort guards. But something felt strange. Tak. As he attempted to strike with his fist, before it could even extend past his chest, it was already blocked. What's more, it was blocked with the sword. The robber kept blocking any movement, twisting and turning without attacking, as if playing with Chung Myung. He could clearly feel the flow of internal energy. You bastard! He clearly attacked the masked man with a swinging leg attack, but the masked man had already vanished from that place. You're too slow. Chung Myung, startled by the voice coming from behind, clenched his fist and fiercely swung backwards. But this time, strength was circulated from the dungeon and amplified through his waist and chest. His fist turned into raging weapons. But what happens when such weapons are blocked before releasing their momentum? The sound of something exploding inside Chung Myung's body. At the same time, his shoulder blade swelled sharply. It couldn't be seen with the eyes, but there was likely a rupture with his shoulder muscle. The same thing kept repeating over and over. Chung Myung, seething in pain and fury, raised his energy to kill the man and swept with a powerful kick. However, the masked man didn't seem to try avoiding it. He lightly took a step back as if avoiding an obnoxious fly. Chung Myung felt his feet brush past the man's chest. The wind pressure made his clothes tremble, but the masked man was untouched. What the hell is he? He couldn't calm himself. Was he fast? No. Strong? No. The masked man was neither fast nor strong. Judging from his appearance, Chung Myung could surely deal with 10 more masked people. But now, he couldn't even touch the hem of the man's clothes. It was as if a young disciple was dealing with his master. He tried all sorts of maneuvers, but none worked. It was the same now. His full-strength blow flew towards the man's face, but it just brushed by with no contact. If he could even graze the man, his flesh would be torn, and his bones would be crushed. But the masked man was completely avoiding his attacks with minimal movements, as if he was playing with a toddler. How could that be possible? He wasn't fast, but he was fast. It wasn't an overwhelming speed. He moved slowly but perfectly in the right directions at the proper distance, effortlessly and without wasting energy. A dream of any martial artist. However, Chung Myung felt miserable now. It was like seeing a goblin. He was fighting a man, but then it felt like he was kicking the air. He couldn't touch the opponent, and he couldn't hurt the opponent no matter what he tried. This man is a monster. If the man was just avoiding it, he wouldn't be so nervous. However, it wasn't just that. He is reading my movements. Even before he attacked, he was able to decide where to move. He was able to lead the opponent's strength to move where he wanted. This was an excellent combination of posture and movement. Chung Myung couldn't even imagine just how strong this man could be. It was wrong from the beginning. Monsters were unpredictable from the start. Had he known such a monster existed in Mount Hua, he never would have done such a thing. But the masked man, who was sneakily dodging the attacks, grabbed his waist and bent over. Oh, damn this body, it hurts! Ugh! The masked man patted his back. It was a bit clumsy. A master who was so great was gasping and tired from this little movement. Ridiculous. But it was happening right in front of his eyes. The masked man was breathing heavily, and the mask around his mouth was wet. The face exposed in the cloth mask was perspiring heavily, and his back was already soaked with sweat. He seemed to be on the verge of collapsing, yet he kept dodging the attacks which flowed unceasingly. The masked man straightened his back again. I wanted to play with you more, but I can't. I'm too weak. Chung Myung's face tensed upon hearing what was said. He did everything he could, yet he couldn't even catch a loose string of this feeble old man's clothing. Chung Myung was confident that if he put his strength on full display, few would be able to defeat him. He even felt he could bring down Mount Hua if he tried. But now, he was toyed with by an old man he'd never seen before, constantly being teased. Why was someone like you never on the front line? You don't need to know. Chung Myung turned and grabbed the sword. Those who only think of themselves live in a strange illusion. Why should I have to answer any of your questions? I'm the one who will ask the questions. For a simple business owner, your martial arts are quite strong. Why is a man with such skills running a business in Hwam? Is there a law which says the strong shouldn't run businesses? But it's a different story when the warrior is clearly greedy for money to the point of tricking a sect. With your level of martial arts, there are plenty of better ways to earn a fortune. Do you understand what I'm saying? Chung Myung's lip inside the mist curled up. What are you trying? That's enough. Chung Myung stopped him from speaking. I get it. You aren't going to tell me anyway. There is no conspiracy going around, so don't misunderstand. I have not been commissioned by anyone, and I am not affiliated with anyone. This is all because of my personal matter. That's what you were going to say, right? Right. I thought so. Chung Myung nodded his head. That's how it usually goes. Unfortunately, those who say such things never confess easily in the beginning. Truthfully, even though your sins are great, I don't feel the need to grind you for information. Once I separate your flesh from bone, the words should spill out naturally. But if I do that, there are bound to be additional problems. Chung Myung nodded to himself. Right, so there is the problem. Do you know what I do when I find myself in this situation? How would I know? We'll make a deal. Ko Mun-young's eyes widened. Huh? I said that we'll make a deal. Chung Myung shook his head and walked towards the man. You've already said that you won't speak. Even if your insides explode, your mouth will remain sealed. So we'll make a deal. You promise to keep your mouth shut, and I promise to beat you until it opens. If you change your mind in the middle and you want to talk, just raise your hand. But it would be better to think quickly. You can't get a refund for a blow which has already struck you. What nonsense! Right, that is my specialty. Here I come. Chung Myung rushed in, closing the gap between them in an instant. Ko Mun-young unknowingly backed away. The masked man wasn't giving out any overpowering energy. It wasn't like the sword in his hand was scary. Even the way he ran made it feel like he would trip and fall at any moment. Yet Ko Mun-young retreated. But the speed he was retreating at wasn't faster than the speed Chung Myung was running. Chung Myung's sword, still in its sheath, swiftly targeted Ko Mun-young's left knee. Realizing that it was impossible to avoid, Ko Mun-young attempted to block his knee with his arm. Pak! And soon, the sword slammed into the shoulder. An unseen attack. Shoulder? Obviously, it was aimed at the leg, so why did his shoulder get hit? But there wasn't much time to think about it. The sword, which struck the shoulder, now aimed for the head. This time, he could clearly determine the correct angle. He crossed his arms over his head. Tuck! His eyes blurred over momentarily. The world turned black for a second before color was regained. At the same time, he felt short of breath, like his neck was tearing. Chung Myung's sword had stabbed him in the throat. The blade was still in its sheath, so it didn't cut his throat. Still, it was a firm lump of metal that had stabbed his throat. How painful would it be? Tears welled up in his eyes as his body trembled. Meanwhile, Chung Myung's sword came crashing down. Shoulder, head, and waist. Now, he was swinging the sword like he was hitting a stray dog. What made it remarkable was that the fat man could never avoid it despite how clumsy the swordsmanship appeared. If he twisted his shoulders, his back was struck. If he tried to move his back, his head got hit. Ko Mun-young, who quickly became a mess, retreated in terror and backed away. I might die. The fear of death began to dominate his mind. Both looked into each other's eyes. At that moment, Ko Mun-young could tell. Eyes. When he saw Chung Myung's cold and emotionless eyes, Ko Mun-young understood. He had seen those eyes many times in his life. All those who had such eyes had one thing in common. Killers. He didn't know what it was, but it was definite that this man had killed countless people. Beating Ko Mun-young to death would be no different than catching a fly. As soon as he chooses to unsheath his sword, Ko Mun-young's head would surely fly off without resistance. No. He didn't want to die. At least not here. Then, Chung Myung began to pull his sword from the sheath. Soon after, he struck at Ko Mun-young's head with a swiftness unseen before. Chung Myung's hand shone in a dazzling blue light. A massive blast erupted from his hands at Chung Myung as he wielded his sword. Chung Myung remained in that position with his arms outstretched in a daze. There was nothing there. Chung Myung wasn't where he was supposed to be. Chung Myung, who came to his senses, hurriedly looked at Chung Myung, who had already come closer as he was sheathing his sword. Chung Myung opened his mouth. Tai Yi Divine Palm Technique. You bastard! Chung Myung's face went pale the moment he realized his mistake. Are you from the Jungnam sect? His face soon became horribly distorted. Chapter 36. Chung Myung quickly pulled himself together. Even if he was caught in a tiger's den, wouldn't he be able to survive as long as he keep his wits together? Whatever do you mean? Huh, look at this fool. Chung Myung snorted. Did you think my eyes are for decoration? Do I look like someone who can't recognize the Tai Yi Divine Palm? Chung Myung shrugged. Quite a coincidence. What a crafty bitch. The person operating a business in Hwam who led the merchants to pressure Mount Hua into the ground over their debt also just happens to know the martial arts of the Jungnam sect. The Tai Yi Divine Palm Technique. You've learned it quite well, huh? Cold sweat ran down Chung Myung's back. He was so surprised that he couldn't even feel the pain from the beating he took. Damn it. What do you mean? He should have been more cautious. Even if his neck was cut off, he shouldn't have used that technique. What's more, he did it in front of a man from Mount Hua. A fatal mistake. But can this be called a mistake? If the old man hadn't pushed Chung Myung to this extent and suddenly unsheathed the sword while beating the hell out of him, Chung Myung wouldn't have used the technique. If it was a coincidence, it was the worst kind. If he aimed for this, then Chung Myung couldn't imagine just how nasty that old man was. Did the Jungnam sect send you? Chung Myung tightly sealed his lips. No matter what he said, it could come out as an excuse. If he could turn the situation around, even if he had to use the lamest excuse, then he would. But it didn't seem like anything would work on this old man, so he kept silent to ensure that he didn't give up more information. Eh? Keeping your mouth shut, eh? Chung Myung walked towards Chung Myung. Well, this is fine too. It's a good thing to be loyal. I think you made a good choice, but there is one thing you're wrong about. Do you know what that is? What is it? I won't tell you. The Jungnam sect wasn't an easy place. Since the old days, the Jungnam sect had been at odds with Mount Hua, but it must be admitted that it was now one of the 10 great sects. There was no way for a sect of that size to do such a sloppy work. That was Chung Myung's thoughts. The information Chung Myung knew had to be limited, and even if he knew more, there was no way to verify its authenticity. All he had to know was that this was indeed the work of the Jungnam sect. Isn't that something that Chung Myung and Mount Hua should find out? Huh, you bastard. Even in the past, when the martial arts world was quite grim, it wasn't this horrible. One of the 10 great sects tries to steal not just other people's martial art techniques, but also their entire sect? Isn't that quite a scam? What an honorable sect. Chung Myung, who could no longer maintain his composure, broke out. Right. Isn't that better for Mount Hua too? Huh? You must understand it too. Mount Hua is hopeless now. Wealth? Riches? They're just additional things for a sect. Mount Hua has lost its martial arts and it can no longer become the same Mount Hua whose name echoed in glory. It's just a matter of it falling down later if it survives now. Oh. Chung Myung listened to Chung Myung's words. I was trying to snuff out the dying Mount Hua's last breaths. Again, this is something Mount Hua should be thankful for. Someone like you should know this, right? Mount Hua can no longer survive. Even the martial arts, the core of any sect, had withered at Mount Hua. Who said that? You don't understand what I am saying. No. Who said that Mount Hua's martial arts have withered? Chung Myung looked at Chung Myung with blank eyes. Chung Myung would have snorted and dismissed it if anyone else had said this. But the words coming from Chung Myung seemed to hold greater weight. In the eyes of Chung Myung, this man was a former master of Mount Hua. You bastards are trying to cut off Mount Hua's last breath? Mount Hua is still alive and well. Even if it dies, it dies. But you piece of shit, what do you think you're trying to do by burying Mount Hua while it still breathes? Whatever. You crooked bastards always justify your actions with some twisted logic. I'd rather you people charge straight ahead and destroy Mount Hua head on. That is the only way I will acknowledge those bitches from the Jungnam sect. The closer one lives, the more likely they will bump into each other. It's true that in diplomatic matters, you must treat your enemies as friends and keep them close. Mount Hua and the Jungnam sect had many similarities, and both had a strong focus on swordsmanship. Despite having different ideals, they stayed close to one another. If two sects with similar techniques were placed side by side, one was bound to die. In the past, Chung Myung would regularly beat the shit out of the Jungnam sect when he felt bored. To be more precise, Chung Myung would provoke them into starting a fight. I am not a member of the Jungnam sect. Is that so? You misunderstood something, but the technique you saw was something I learned by accident. Ah, right. Should I tell you a surprising fact? What is it? I am not a member of Mount Hua either. Yes, that makes sense. You son of a bitch! Chung Myung was startled at Chung Myung's reaction. That was close. He almost hit him. Anyway, in return for showing me that technique, I will show you something interesting. If you can recognize this, it will be interesting. But if you don't, then it's a shame. Chung Myung slowly stuck his sword out. Tell the one who sent you. Chung Myung's way of speaking had changed. The playful appearance was no more. His bent back was now straight, and the drooping shoulders had regained their form. A perfect posture, picturesque. Chung Myung, who witnessed it, was shocked. A sudden breeze began to blow over the area. The wind seemed to carry the gentle scent of plum blossoms that filled the air. Plum blossoms give off the most intense fragrance when they bloom in the snow. Although it is winter now, Mount Hua's spirit remains unbroken. Even the spring will come and the plum blossom will bloom in full. Chung Myung saw it, the tip of the sword which moved. Shiver. The movement, which began with a tiny vibration, soon grew into a great tremor, and the tremor turned into an illusory sword whose trajectory seemed to embroider the sky in a fantasy. The tip of the sword seemed to cover the entire sky. Vivid plum blossoms bloomed at the sword's tip. After a dreary winter, the plum blossoms, which heralded a warm spring, bloomed all over the mountain, painted into the world through Chung Myung's sword. This is an illusion. The wind blew. The plum blossoms, which covered the sky as if fluttering in the spring wind, began to bloom. Eventually, the petals flew up as if swimming in the sky and landed on Chung Myung's head. The petals gently swept past Chung Myung, blowing away his consciousness like the wind. Until the very end, he didn't know what he was looking at. Only the sound of him falling to the floor unconscious could be heard. The plum blossom petals covering the sky disappeared like a mirage. Chung Myung, who withdrew his sword, turned around. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth due to overexerting himself to operate the technique. Chung Myung, who took off his mask, spit out a large surge of blood. I'm going to die for sure. He had a broken body that lacked strength. If it was the past, such a thing could have been done without sweating. The foundation is good, but I still might die. Ouch! Chung Myung put the mask on and thought about coming up with some new countermeasures. Well then, his gaze went to the other merchants. They were looking at Chung Myung as if they had seen a ghost. Why wouldn't they? They had never seen or heard of plum blossoms blooming in the sky due to a sword technique. No, they had heard such a feat was accomplished by masters in the past, but those warriors were dead, so they believed it to be an exaggerated legend. However, this man brought the legend to life before their eyes. From their point of view, as those who tried to extort money by scamming Mount Hua, Chung Myung was nothing short of a Grim Reaper. Who wants to be beaten first? Who wants to leave? Me! I will go away too! Please spare us! Chung Myung just nodded his head. Good! So cooperative. Merchants rushed out and away from their carts, but of course, Chung Myung had no intention of letting them go so easily. Stop moving. The merchants froze in unison. If you just leave like this, what am I to do about these carts? Think a little. Think. Chung Myung pointed toward the unconscious Chung Myung. No more words were needed. As soon as the words were spoken, the merchants rushed to their carts. 800 nyang. 2,800 nyang. It is 8,000. What? You had that much money? Is that important now? Some even yelled at the others. Chung Myung, who saw it, frowned. Hey! Yes. Did you include the cost of the cart and the horse too? Recalculate. Yes. Once it was done, Chung Myung nodded. All right. Then I will lend you the horse, so one of you will go to the nearest town from here and get the money. I will sell these wares to you." The merchants looked at Chung Myung with blank eyes. They were the sort of people who lived their lives obsessed with money, but even for them, this was the first time they'd seen such a person. "Bring the money on a non-marked slip. If you put anything on the slip, I will kill you right away, okay?" "Yes." "One person will go." "But..." "What?" one merchant asked. "What if the one going escapes?" Chung Myung laughed. "What good would running away do? Do you people have money now?" "No." "And your businesses have been confiscated?" "Yes." "Then what good will running and escaping even do? If you want to at least get something, you should come back, right?" "Then what if they report to the government?" "Try it." Chung Myung gently raised his leg and hit the floor. Thud. The ground beneath them cracked. "Report it, but don't come back with them. Run to the end of the world because I will capture that bastard even if I die. So don't think of coming back." The merchants gave up on the report too. Thinking about it, their families were here. They couldn't just run away and leave them. "Go." Yes. Mount Hua was a benevolent sect. However, there was one reason why the merchants were unhappy. Mount Hua was benevolent, but not everyone who lived in Mount Hua was. On that day, a masked man with a money slip as thick as a book climbed Mount Hua with joy and excitement. The wealth made from the sweat and tears of many people were silently stored in a greedy warehouse. Chapter 37. Mount Hua hadn't changed much. The wind blowing into it was the same. The old buildings were the same. What changed wasn't Mount Hua, but the people who lived there. Jogul took off his uniform. The sweat was pouring down from the uniform as he threw it off. After morning training, his entire body was steeped in sweat, and he couldn't stay without changing clothes. "Man, today's training was really hard." "Really? It's so much to do right at dawn." As he heard that, Jogul smiled bitterly. The people around him were also hoping to get a clean bath. Together, they washed their bodies and sweaty clothes in the ice-cold stream. Jogul, who put on a new uniform, packed his laundry and said, "Let's get going." "Yes, Sahyung." The others picked up their robes and started going up. Looking at the people walking ahead, Jogul had no choice but to think about it. A lot has changed. In the past, such a sight couldn't be dreamed of. Although the other third-class disciples were training, they weren't passionate about martial arts. Even Yunjong and Jogul were the same. But now, everyone was voluntarily coming out for practice at dawn. There was no end to their complaints, but they never rebelled against it. What would one call this scene? "It feels like a martial arts sect." Jogul smiled bitterly. Looking at the disciples walking up, they all looked like martial artists' disciples. Did that mean that Mount Hua was nothing until now? "Why are you smiling like that?" At the voice next to him, Jogul turned his head and looked at his great Sahyung, Yunjong. "Ah, Sahyung, it's a bit embarrassing to say, but I was thinking about how everyone seems so much like a true martial artist now." "Is that so?" "It's a bit of a strange thought, though." "No, I was thinking the same." Jogul finally laughed out loud. Not long ago, Jogul had never imagined that he would train to this extent on Mount Hua. He did everything instructed in his dorm, but it was half-heartedly done so he could finish and go back to resting. Jogul's goal was to pass the time and then descend and return home. No, it was everyone's goal in Mount Hua. Could he genuinely feel passionate about this? Lately, it felt like something had changed. Not only him, but the eyes of the other disciples had changed too. It has to be because of him. Jogul thought of Chung Myung's weird behavior. Chung Myung was changing Mount Hua. It was clearly a small wind that most people couldn't even feel, but it was bound to turn into a strong wind or a typhoon that would shake Mount Hua. The result of these changes will be evident in the future. Walking up the mountain, Jogul, who reached Mount Hua, straightened his shoulders and touched his chest. A faint feeling of pride began to swell inside his chest. But then, the pride he felt flew away into the open sky. "Hey, you shouldn't touch that." "Move, move, move. We're going to push all the materials inside and then start working. Are you deaf or something?" "You, if you fall there, you won't get any pay for a month. If just to climb up here is tough, then what are you worth?" Jogul blankly stared at the figures in front of Mount Hua. His gaze shifted from left to right. What? Who are those people? People he had never met were walking up, Everyone had tools and materials which he had never seen before. You! No, not there! This way! It was comforting to see someone he recognized in the group of strangers. Eunam was standing among the crowd giving instructions. Sahyung, Yunjong, who received Jogul's gaze, walked towards Eunam with a blank expression. Sasuk. Huh? Yunjong. What is all this? Oh. Eunam smiled brightly. He usually wasn't the kind to explain such things, even to Yunjong, the eldest of the third-class disciples. But now, Eunam was in a good mood. They're workers. Workers? Yes. You know that many of our buildings are a bit old, right? Yes. Not old. Ancient would be the right word. Even Mount Hua's nameplate on the front gate was crumbling, and if a strong wind blew, it seemed many buildings would collapse. At least the place where the disciples stayed and trained were constantly repaired and maintained. But the other buildings were left without management due to a lack of manpower. With our current opportunity, we plan on repairing the area. We'll re-establish the place. Huh? Don't just keep looking. Go and help carry the materials. It seems like all the workers are having difficulty bringing the materials up here. Most of the wood can be acquired by cutting trees nearby, but it seems they have some wood that they can't find nearby. Huh? Move fast. Move already. Hurry. Looking at Eunam shouting with a smile, Jogul had a blank expression. Maybe the change was faster than he expected. What is going on? Jogul looked at the dining table in shock. His hunger-soaked stomach was rumbling after carrying the materials up, but looking at the food on the table, he was more flustered than hungry. What is all this? Am I dreaming? No matter how I try to look at it, isn't this meat? The other Sahyungs wore the same skeptical expression. All eyes in the hall were fixed on the table. Something extraordinary was on the table. There was meat being served. They really served us meat? To kill a living being, cook and serve it to us, sacred martial artists. What a windfall. Something must be wrong. Jogul smiled grandly. In Mount Hua, there was no prohibition on the consumption of meat. Mount Hua did have a rule that condemned eating meat in the long past, but it had changed as Mount Hua developed. Vegetarianism was recommended, but meat wasn't prohibited. But allowing them to eat meat and actively putting meat on the table were two different things. It had been years since the disciples entered Mount Hua, and it was their first time seeing meat on the table. Can I eat this? They put it on the table so that it would be eaten. Everyone looked at Yunjong. If their Sasuks were not there, the decision-maker would be the great Sahyung, Yunjong. Yunjong smiled and said, "Let's eat. The food is getting cold." Yes. Jogul sat down at a loss for words and felt a piercing gaze. All the Sahyungs were looking at Jogul. No. To be precise, they were looking at Yunjong, who was next to Jogul, with fiery eyes. Yunjong, who understood it, grabbed his chopsticks and picked up a piece of meat. And the moment he put it in his mouth, pop, 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 chopsticks came flying into the meat bowl from all directions. Some were directly throwing it into their mouths too. When Jogul saw that, it seemed so absurd that he wanted to scream. But then he didn't. Jogul's chopsticks also flew like lightning. If I am late, I won't get any. Out of the way! My meat! 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 Seeing the fragments of meat scattered everywhere, Yunjong closed his eyes. Mount Hua. The Mount Hua he knew was becoming strange. Well, the longer you live, the more changes you'll experience. Right. They started construction all of a sudden, and now meat is being served for our meals. We even got 2 new uniforms, right? Yes. Yunjong narrowed his eyes as if thinking about something. Seeing that, Jogul asked, "What are you thinking?" "I think the money is quite good." Jogul laughed. Even if others didn't hear it, it felt weird hearing such things from Yunjong. No matter how much money we have, I didn't expect the seniors to change so quickly. Did you think they would purposely keep their disciples poor? They just couldn't help it in the past. That was right. It wasn't that meat was prohibited. It was because meat was expensive. It was something that couldn't be done because of the lack of money, so they are doing it now that they have money. But isn't it weird? Jogul nodded his head. Didn't you see Sasuk Eunam who couldn't hide his smile on his lips? Right. They all saw it. Jogul could swear that it was his first time seeing Eunam smile so brightly. Who could have even imagined that Eunam could smile like that? What was certain was that Mount Hua had clearly entered a path of change. Sahyung, what do you think will happen now? It was a broad question, but Yoonjung understood what Jogul was asking. You should know it too, right? Mount Hua is changing. Yes, so we need to be prepared. Prepared? It isn't just about money. You saw it too, in that chest. Yes, there were books. The scene where the sect leader yelled the name of some martial arts and almost fainted. Mount Hua is changing. We won't be able to avoid the change, so we need to strengthen ourselves. Then, won't we be able to see something different from what we originally expected? Jogul nodded his head. Is it all because of him? Jogul couldn't shake the suspicion that Chung Myung's manipulation was what caused this whole situation. That obviously bad acting in front of the chest. Jogul shook his head. What did he do? Do you think we'll be able to know? Even though no names were mentioned, they both knew who he referred to. What's certain is that there's no way to predict that jerk's actions ahead of time. We need to remain alert. If we approach this with clumsy determination, we might end up being swept away in the storm he creates. Don't worry, Sahyung. I'm Jogul. Right. Yoonjung smiled and headed back to the dorm. A slightly different thought lingered on Jogul's mind. No way to predict. Jogul had a different idea. Maybe Chung Myung wasn't someone that only the disciples, but even the Sasuks and sect leader couldn't handle. By the way, where is he? I haven't seen him since this morning. Didn't you hear? The sect leader was looking for him today. He's probably at the sect leader's place. Sect leader? Why was the sect leader looking for him? How could I know? As Yoonjung shrugged his shoulders, Jogul sighed. I really can't understand him. Chapter 38. Are you alright? Yes, I'm fine. Are you really fine? Really, fine. You don't look it. Hyunjong's face creased, looking at Chung Myung. He was speechlessly staring at Chung Myung. He looked withered, as if he was just skin stretched over bone, with a face that was pale like a ghost. How bad could his health be? No matter how he looked at it, this kid seemed to be on the verge of starvation. It was likely that people would think that the other disciples were snatching away his food. He wasn't like this when he first came here. Hyunjung turned his head and asked Eunam, what did the medical practitioner say? That he was out of chi. Chi? Yes, they said that excessive training has caused damage to his pure chi. Huh? Hyunjung looked at Chung Myung. Child, you practiced until you damaged your pure chi? Why would you do such a thing? It wasn't that. Training his ass. Chung Myung hadn't properly trained since he entered Mount Hua. Of course, that's all the medical practitioner could say. It was true that his fragile body tapped into the pure chi in his body and damaged it. How could a child who just began learning martial arts shatter their chi? Naturally, the only explanation was overtraining. It was a strange misunderstanding, but he decided to go along with it at this time. I apologize, sect leader. I just wanted to learn the martial arts of Mount Hua as soon as possible. This young one is quite good. The sect leader nodded his head as if he began to like Chung Myung even more. Chung Myung didn't lie. It was true at heart. Eating quickly will spoil the stomach. What are we to do now that you are sick? Be more careful, child. Yes. Hyunjung smiled in satisfaction. The child in front of him was Mount Hua's good luck charm, and he was a devoted disciple to the core. Right. Did you enjoy the tea? I don't really enjoy it. Chung Myung shrugged it off. Maybe I would enjoy alcohol. The tea was too strong for Chung Myung. Unlike alcohol, which stimulated the throat, tea was just grassy water. Even his Sahyung couldn't understand why Chung Myung loved alcohol so much. Is there a law that all sect leaders of Mount Hua should enjoy tea? In the past too, the sect leaders loved tea, and in Chung Myung's eyes, the long tradition of people liking it was unusual. The sect leader carefully handed the tea to Chung Myung, and he took it with both hands. It is a pity you don't enjoy it, but please taste this tea. Yes. Chung Myung quickly drank the tea in one gulp without even appreciating the fragrance. There was a greater pleasure in enjoying the aroma of tea, but to Chung Myung, tea didn't seem like anything more than hot water. Hyunjung looked at Chung Myung with a sad face as he put down the teacup. How was it? It's cold. There was a subtle disappointment in the sect leader's face. But Chung Myung was being honest. Right. Hyunjung decided to blow away the awkwardness by coughing as his expression gently relaxed. I have called you here to reward you for your recent achievements. Thanks to you, Mount Hua was able to get out of this crisis. You did an amazing job. I haven't done anything. How could you say that? If it weren't for you, we would have all been on the streets right now. I just happened to walk past it, and I accidentally stumbled onto that chest. Oh, what a coincidence. Hyunjung shook his head. No, there is no such thing as a coincidence in this world. Everything is the result of a connection. Chung Myung nodded his head. Hyunjung just said it to himself, but it seemed like it was directed at him. I mean, at times he is extremely sharp. Isn't that right, Unam? Yes, sect leader. Also, even if it was a coincidence, the contribution made was very significant. Besides, since you weren't greedy and informed the sect leader right away, how could we dare call your devotion small? Right. Hyunjung touched his beard. Yes. Then he looked at Chung Myung with warm eyes. It is only natural to give reward to the one who made this possible. Mount Hua wishes to reward you. That was why we called you. Reward? Yes. Is there anything you want? Chung Myung was a little confused. Was there something he wanted? It would be a lie to say that you could give up such wealth with no regrets. If you need, we can even return a suitable sum of wealth. Money is not needed. Hyunjung was a bit shocked. You don't need wealth? Yes. Mount Hua already provides me with food and clothing. Even if I take the money, where would I use it? There's nowhere in Mount Hua to use it. Right. Hyunjung smiled. The way of Tao. No matter what, it wasn't easy to give up on wealth. Just because he can't spend it now doesn't mean that he can't spend it in the future. Seeing him refuse the wealth, it seemed like he was a child with no greed, a child who was on the path of Tao. However, Chung Myung's inner thoughts were very different from the warm interpretation Hyunjung had of him. How much could you even give me? The sect leader's secret warehouse had become Chung Myung's personal hideout. Inside there was an amount of wealth that would drive others crazy and drop Hyunjung's jaw to the floor. Chung Myung was already the richest man in Hwaum, so he didn't need some minor wealth given by the sect leader. Then what do you want? I could allow you to learn more advanced techniques which aren't normally allowed. I don't really want techniques either. Huh? Is that so? Yes. Do you find these techniques meaningless? Chung Myung shook his head. It isn't like that. This disciple doesn't know much, but I think there is meaning in progressing through the martial arts one step at a time in accordance with the techniques passed down by our predecessors. Hyunjung was shocked. Is that so? Yes. Didn't you say that eating too quickly will spoil the stomach? I did. I think the same applies to martial arts. I will learn it slowly and progress. Yes, right. You are absolutely right. Hyunjung nodded his head. The more they spoke, the more he liked the kid. Has a child who knows nothing of martial arts already started following the path of Tao? Where did he learn all this? Hyunjung couldn't hide his excitement, but Chung Myung had a different thought. Who is giving whom martial arts, you jerk? Still, Chung Myung struggled to determine how he would hand over the rest of the techniques he had left out this time. It would have been better if he had given it to them all at once. However, the human mind is strange. If you give a man both a gold and silver bar simultaneously, his focus would most likely be on the gold and would think less of the silver. The same was true with martial arts. If all of them were given at once, would they know the value of each technique? I need to pay attention to every single one of these things. Sahyung, I was wrong. I'm sorry. He was sorry that he listened through one ear and let it spill out the other. He should have tried to understand how hard being a sect leader was. Looking at Mount Hua through the eyes of his Sahyung, Chung Myung could imagine how difficult things were in the past. Although it was difficult to atone for the dead, Chung Myung vowed to do his best for Mount Hua now. It is good that you have no greed, but it will be difficult for me. Then, there must be something you need, right? Something I need? What could Chung Myung need? First, he could ask for some freedom, which would let him move around more. that was more urgent than anything right now. Sect leader, I am not lazy when it comes to martial arts. I can see that by looking at you. Chung Myung coughed and continued. But I think there's a limit to only learning in this place. I want to see the wide world once in a while. Please give me permission to go down the mountain whenever I want. Hyunjung frowned a little. I understand your intentions, but it is against the rules of Mount Hua. Your contributions is great enough, but if we do that, others may complain that we're giving you preferential treatment. Let me think about it. Yes, sect leader. Is there anything else? Chung Myung, who was worried, opened his eyes wide. Sect leader. As you can see, my body isn't great. Yes, anyone can see that. And the doctor said I damaged my chi. Yes, I've heard. So could you give me vitality pills? Vitality pills? Yes, Mount Hua's vitality pill. Don't most sects usually have something like that? Hyunjung laughed. Right, vitality pill, right. That sounds nice. Is there anything better to supplement the body and return it to its original state? Yes, right. Right, vitality pill, right. The merit you put in is certainly enough. Hyunjung looked at Chung Myung. Didn't you say you wanted to go to Hwam? Huh? Of course. It is against the rules. But considering what you've accomplished, I can grant you that much. Yes, sect leader. In the name of Mount Hua Sect leader, when disciple Chung Myung wishes to head down to Hwam, he will not need permission from others. Yes. However, Chung Myung, you must keep within Hwam. Furthermore, you are directly responsible for your own actions and keeping out of trouble while there. Do you understand? Yes, but, Chung Myung asked, tilting his head, the vitality pill? Also, be sure not to neglect your training while traveling. Now then, go. No, wait. Sect leader, the vitality. I have high expectations for you. Keep your head high. Yes. Good. Take care, sect leader. Hyunjung smiled as Chung Myung bowed and walked out. What the hell? I'm suffering out here. That stingy old man should give me some pills. I don't even have vitality pills for myself. You think I could give one to you, brat? Chapter 39. Hyunjung, Eunam, and Hyunsang remained in the sect leader's residence after Chung Myung left. What do you think? Eunam smiled at Hyunjung's question. He seems to understand the path of Tao. You felt the same way too. Hyunjung smiled happily. It was true that Chung Myung seemed great. Why not? Thanks to him, Mount Hua was saved from extinction. There was no enemy invasion or internal strife. Instead, money caused the issue entirely. Thankfully, they were able to avoid the most disgraceful situation where Mount Hua, with its long history and tradition, lost their sect because of such a petty issue. So, from Hyunjung's point of view, Chung Myung was worthy of extra care. But now, the evaluation was unrelated to his contributions. Even if he is a child, there is a lot of depth in his words. His language can be rough at times, but it is understandable when considering his age. Right. Eunam's thoughts deepened the impression Hyunjung had. It didn't feel like talking to a child when speaking with Chung Myung. It wasn't just because of how he spoke. Rather, there was nothing childlike about him. What could it be? Am I the only one who feels it? He couldn't put it into words. The scent of an experienced man came from the child. I can't explain it in any way other than the Tao. Eunam tilted his head slightly. Unlike a child, he has deep thoughts. He seems to always consider what he says before speaking. He is a smart child in many ways. Right. If nothing happens, it will be possible for him to lead the next generation of Mount Hua. Hyunjung nodded silently. He then looked at Hyunsang. What do you think? Hyunsang had only silently watched the entire thing until now. Don't you know that I don't have eyes for judging people, sect leader? Really now? All I am asking is how you feel about him. Feel? Hyunsang closed his eyes. Time passed slowly, and as he thought for a long time, he said, That child doesn't seem like a child. I know that children who have lived a rough life usually have deep thoughts, But that simply means they are more mature for their age. It doesn't mean they behave as adults. Hyun-sang, who glanced around, continued. But the child isn't precocious. He speaks and behaves like a grown man to the point where I would like to dig in and see what's hidden inside his mind. Do you believe he's hiding something? I don't mean it in a bad way, but Hyun-sang didn't say more. I understand. Hyun-jung nodded his head. I know what everyone is thinking, but don't worry too much. As you can see, isn't he a child? Yes, sect leader. We aren't the kind to use people. We are here to nurture people. If it is a good seed, we help by letting them grow their talents, and if they have a problem, we need to lead them to fix that problem. You're right. Yes, sect leader. How is the construction going? It is difficult to replenish all the materials due to the steep hills. We are cutting down trees as much as possible, but we can't speed up much since it takes time to dry and trim the cut trees. I see. Hyun-jung brushed his beard with a serious face and asked, Are you displeased with me, who only cares about money now? Of course not, sect leader. Please understand, Mount Hua is being reborn now. When a person makes a new resolution or sets a new will, they must refine their attitude and change their thoughts accordingly. This is no different for the sect itself. The sect should be rebuilt to obviously convey Mount Hua's meaning and determination. Sect leader is right. Hyun-jung nodded his head. Saje. Yes, sect leader. Hyun-sang bowed his head slightly. Please finish interpreting the newly acquired martial arts books as soon as possible. However, I don't mean to rush you. The fate of Mount Hua will change depending on how well we can pass these techniques to our students. I will make sure that there is not an inch of laxity. I trust you. Seeing Hyun-jung, who was immersed in thought, Hyun-sang's face hardened. Should I tell him? No. Sect leader was currently envisioning the future of Mount Hua, which will continue for thousands of years. He shouldn't be bothered by Measly's story now. But Hyun-sang sighed. When he discovered what happened, he felt so shocked by it. However, he couldn't get rid of his growing doubts lately as he kept digging deeper into the process of interpreting these books. For a book which has at least 100 years old, the paper was too clean and maintained, and there were traces of ink smeared here and there. If my suspicion is correct, then the books wasn't from the past, but recently written. But then who? Who could recreate martial arts exclusively practiced in Mount Hua? It didn't make sense. If anyone could do such a thing, it would be better for them to come and directly speak to the sect leader. Then the entire Mount Hua would support the man like a king. It means that someone was helping Mount Hua, but didn't want to reveal their identity. Hyun-sang shook his head. He shouldn't overthink. He was worried about some conspiracies, so he reviewed the martial arts repeatedly. But no matter how much he looked, it was genuine. There was nothing wrong or misleading in there. The strange thing was that he couldn't find anything out of place. Let's review it one more time. If anything was strange, he could always tell the sect leader. A sect which even beggars wouldn't come to. Chung Myung kicked a stone. What the hell did you all do with all the vitality pills left behind? He could guess from the look on the sect leader's face. It was clear that there were no pills left in Mount Hua. It was hopeless. If they couldn't make the pills because they didn't have any money then, now that they had money, the only answer is... I would need to wait for now. Right. However, Hyun-jung chose to change the subject and gave permission to leave the sect instead of talking about the pills. Not a single thing is right here. His stomach hurt. Even if someone deliberately planned to destroy Mount Hua, they wouldn't pick such a variety of ways. No martial arts, no pills, no people, no money. Not a single thing goes well. Just my luck. He was upset, but what could he do? It was all his karma. Chung Myung licked his lips and patted his stomach. What a pain in the ass. His body didn't recover as easily as he hoped. He thought it would be fine dealing with the side effects, but using his internal chi in a child's body whose musculature wasn't complete injured him more than expected. The problem is that it's not enough. His body wasn't recovering. Perhaps it was because he kept expecting his childish body to function at the level of his previous body. That's it. In his past life, if Chung Myung had heard that a child had tapped into their internal chi, he would have lifted the child and spanked him on the ass. That was how dangerous it was. But that was how humans are. Others shouldn't do it, but they themselves could. The problem he was facing was that the one disgruntled and suffering was none other than himself. Since his body was not recovering, his training slowed, and since his training slowed, his martial arts were lacking. And he was too severely concentrating on rebuilding Mount Hua. If things kept going like this, it would take another half year to recover at least. I might die within half a year. He could have handled it in an older man's body, but in such a young body, it was too fatal. Half a year in a young body was like a decade for him. It wasn't just about recovering and feeling comfortable. Now, Chung Myung was trying to build a perfect foundation. Wasn't he still in a human body? Children grow and change. There is an ideal time for growth. The opportunity is lost if the timing is missed. It's necessary to build the basics and lay the groundwork for your future achievements when learning martial arts. I need to find a way. Chung Myung had a severe face. I need to find a vitality pill. A weakened chi can be healed. If it can't be resolved with daily cultivation, he would have to find another source to repair it. So there are two ways. Either receive pure ki from someone else or eat a precious vitality pill. However, there was no way Chung Myung could find someone who would transfer ki to him. And there was currently no way he could get his hands on a vitality pill. It wasn't something that money could buy. Besides, wasn't Chung Myung a child? It was impossible for anyone in Hwam to give him a pill. No other way. Really? You don't even have dog shit for medicine. What kind of sect doesn't have a pill? You rotten bastards. In the past, vitality pills were rolling on the floor of Mount Hua. It was natural to eat one pill. And the plum blossom pill? That wasn't even medicine. The plum blossom pills were so common that they weren't treated as pills. If Chung Myung were a little stronger, he wouldn't even bother looking for a plum blossom pill. It could be helpful for him now, but they were just useless herbs that didn't even increase his stamina in the past. Chung Myung used to use them to recover from hangovers. They had pretty great results. When you secretly drink alcohol and the hangover doesn't leave the body, eat a bunch of plum blossom pills. Although it had no value in training in martial arts, it was the best thing for a hangover. Of course, if his Sahyong knew of his thoughts, he would have hit Chung Myung. So, did he hit the plum blossom pit? Chung Myung's body, which had been walking, came to a standstill. Hangover relief? He turned his head. Why didn't I think of that? Right, those pills. No. Right, they must be there. Mount Hua's troublemaker. No, Mount Hua's former troublemaker, Chung Myung's secret vitality pill. Sometimes a rotten mind is needed. Chung Myung giggled at his past self and started running towards a cliff in the distance with all his might. Chapter 40. Chung Myung raised his head with a grim look. Clenching his jaw, he bent his neck up. Little more. Just a little more. And a little bit more. It was only when his neck was tilted to the extent that it looked like it would break. Was he able to see what he wanted? A shaved cliff. A terrifying cliff, endlessly high with the top obscured by mist, filled his eyes. Crazy. A smile on his lips. Dangerously disconnected cliff was what the people living in Mount Hua called it. The highest and the most dangerous cliff, famous for being rugged even among the 5 mountains. And in the middle of this perilous cliff was the place Chung Myung was looking for. The most secretive location in the world. Very few people from Mount Hua would come here, and even less knew about the secret. Well, I'm the only one who knows of this. In the middle of the cliff was a small cave that couldn't be found without climbing the cliff directly. The steep peak was a place where the people of Mount Hua were prohibited from training. However, Chung Myung was someone who reveled in being disobedient, so he enjoyed coming here frequently. Then, by chance, he discovered a small cave in the middle of the cliff, and from then on, he used it as his exclusive hiding spot. It helped me out a lot. For example, drinking alcohol while avoiding the eyes of his Sahyong, eating meat while avoiding from his Sahyong, or taking a nap while ignoring his Sahyong. Oh, Sahyong, why did you even keep me alive? He should have beat him to death. Now that he had changed his position and began acting as a guardian for Mount Hua, Chung Myung could understand his Sahyong's constant lectures. If anyone in the current Mount Hua behaved like the old Chung Myung, He would beat them to death. Even Chung Myung wanted to kill his old self. No, was I crazy? It felt like his neck was going to break. No sane person would even consider using the middle of a cliff like this as a shelter. And now, Chung Myung has a weak and damaged body. Chung Myung, the Plum Blossom Sword Saint, could have happily skipped his way up this cliff. But it's impossible for Chung Myung, the third-class disciple, to climb this. Why? Why did he have to be a child? There was no place to step and no place to grab. The cliff was too smooth for him to move up. This cliff was always like that. I've had it, really. He really wanted to hurt his past self for choosing this place. Taking a deep breath, Chung Myung looked up at the cliff again. Still, I need to go. There was no going back. If someone asked why, Chung Myung would answer, "There are vitality pills there, damn it." If his memory was clear, then there should be plum blossom pills and many other pills in that cave. Because that cave is where he would get drunk and sleep. The pills he used to relieve his hangovers should also be there. There's no other solution. No matter how much the alcohol kicked his ass in the morning, it's still a precious vitality pill. But they were hidden in the cave to recover from hangovers. This wasn't something any sane person would do. But thanks to that, Chung Myung had a chance. Chung Myung looked at the steep cliff with a determined face and turned around. He strode into the forest on the other side. Phew! He took a deep breath. It's crazy no matter how much you think about it. Chung Myung was now standing on top of that cliff. He came to the edge of it with a long rope woven in vines in his hands. No matter how much he thought about it, climbing up was impossible since it was difficult to climb a smooth cliff and the height was too much for him. With a child's body, it was too harsh to climb up. Then how about descending down to the cave from the top? It must be more manageable than climbing up. But the problem was, it is 10 times as dangerous. Chung Myung glanced down and gulped. He couldn't even see the ground. All he could see was the cliff and a veil of mist hiding what lay beneath. He stepped back and grabbed his chest. Fuck, I'm shaking. He enjoyed being here in the past, like walking into his own personal garden, but now it felt like the entrance to hell. How many vines did he have to combine to get himself down with a single rope? How many people would think of climbing down this cliff with just a rope? Right now, he had to do it. No other choice or option. Well, you only live once, not twice. No, this is my second life. Chung Myung tied the rope in his hand to a nearby stone. This was going to be his one lifeline. He pulled on the rope several times to ensure it would hold him and then stood at the edge of the cliff. Saving Mount Hua is so difficult. He even had to risk his life like this. Damn it! Chung Myung cursed loudly and boldly started going down the cliff. It was never easy to go down a steep cliff. It was challenging to find any stable footholds. Chung Myung leaned his body on the cliff to move slowly and attached himself to the walls. After struggling and yelling out, Chung Myung slowly moved down. Fuck! Damn it! If I had known, I would have learned acrobatics. It was something that Chung Myung didn't learn in the past. It was then. The stone ledge he stepped on as he moved down crumbled. Tuck, tuck. Chung Myung blankly stared at the falling stones. The rocks bounced off the cliff and burrowed into the thick mist below. After a long time, a noise slightly echoed back. Whoa! It takes so long to fall to the bottom from this height. If Chung Myung fell, there would be no corpse left to find. Realizing that, he unconsciously gulped in fear. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint isn't afraid of anything, not even the Heavenly Demon. But that's if the opponent was mortal. What about the ground below him? Between fighting the Heavenly Demon or falling to his death, it's a no-brainer which is worse. Imagine dying here and going to the afterlife. How would his Sahyong greet him? He would be downgraded from the hero who killed the Heavenly Demon to the idiot who fell from a cliff. Shit! Chung Myung began to move. It was a little awkward at first, but after a few repetitions, he was moving like a lizard attached to the wall. It has to be down there. Chung Myung, who was descending, frowned. There was a huge crack in the middle of the cliff. Going inside would be tough, so he would have to jump. Taking a deep breath, he looked down. I'm the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. I can't be afraid of this. He boldly threw his body. At the same time that he let go, he cried out, Ah! He reached out and grabbed onto a protruding stone. Hanging off the rock, Chung Myung shouted, "Ugh, that was scary!" But thanks to the jump, he traveled a lot. Huh? Chung Myung looked up. The stone he was hanging on to. No. No, it's... Help out a little, you conscienceless cliff. Crack. The stone broke and Chung Myung's body began to fall. Oh my god, oh my god! Chung Myung desperately swung his arm and legs in the air. What would happen if I fell from here? Death. Certain death. Am I going to die? Die? Chung Myung? It was then. Thud. Suddenly, a strong shock was felt from Chung Myung's waist and his body floated into the air. Huh? The swaying rope came into Chung Myung's sight. Right! Tuck. After bouncing a few times, the violent movements began to settle. Chung Myung, hanging listlessly from the rope, sighed in lament. A moment later, he burst into laughter and yelled, Indeed! A man must be prepared! He wasn't sure if the rope would hold up well, as it was made of vines, but it turned out to be strong enough since it was only holding a child's body. Chung Myung slowly looked around. There! His eyes shone, a bulge that wasn't far from where he was hanging. Below there was the hiding place of the former Chung Myung. Out of habit, he measured the rope, and it seemed like he guessed the right length. Ha! Heaven is helping me out! Grabbing the rope, he took a deep breath. First, he was still hanging in mid-air from the rope. He needed to cling to the cliff. Ugh! Chung Myung began to swing his body. The still rope then began to shake back and forth. I need to find the right angle. Woom. Woom. Chung Myung's body, clinging to the rope, gradually swung closer and closer to the cliff. Ugh! He reached out and grabbed the cliff, but the rock was so smooth that he couldn't take hold of it. Once more! Chung Myung moved and kicked the cliff to straighten his body, and then with both hands, he held the... What? Chung Myung's head shot up like a thunderbolt at the sound. His eyes quickly found what he was looking for. The rope was halfway torn. Eh? No, that can't be true. Usually, the line should stay until he reaches the cliff, and then it should break. Rip. No! Ah! Chung Myung fell along with the momentum from rebounding towards the cliff. I'm gonna die! Oh my god! Since he was already close to the cliff because of the rebound, Chung Myung raised his ki and tried to grab hold of the cliff. Crack. The bones which were overburdened broke. Ah, shit! His wrist couldn't handle the weight of the speed he was moving at. Desperately, he thrust his other hand with ki and held onto the cliff. Crack. The result was the same. Oh, what? They aren't some flimsy twigs. Why are the bones breaking down so easily? What sort of damn body was I given? Survive a bit longer. Chung Myung swung his arms and legs like he was swimming in the air, but somehow it didn't seem to work. Ugh! If the hands don't work, use the body. Like a frog, he clung to the cliff. Instead of his broken wrist, he held the cliff with his arms and legs. Ah! Hot! Hot! With his body scraping against the sheer cliff, an immense scorching heat could be felt. Despite the pain, it worked, and his falling speed reduced dramatically. Now all he had to do was find that protruding cave. Chung Myung lowered his gaze. He couldn't find it. Instead, he was able to find something better than it. A much safer place than the protruding cave. Land! It was the ground. It was a sudden crash. Chung Myung's smiling body was plastered to the ground. Thud. A cloud of dust scattered around. Chung Myung's body trembled as it was buried in the dust. I'm alive! Thanks to slowing down the fall, he escaped death. However, his entire body was shattered. Every single spot ached and hurt. Ugh! After struggling in place for a while, Chung Myung managed to drag his weary body up and stared at the cliff with searing scarlet eyes full of anger. I will climb you no matter what means I have to use, you damn disgusting cliff.